Philosophy is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, existence, and reality. Since the dawn of time, intellectuals have been developing arguments for the existence of God, but which arguments are still academically valid? Which arguments are philosophy's best arguments for the existence of God? Earlier today, we've discussed this topic with a theologian and also philosopher. But before we get to our show, I'd like to ask all our viewers to subscribe to our channel down below, because this is Zain Khan and we're live. Welcome to Zain Khan Live, where everything is discussed. Today, the guest of our show is Kenneth Samples, a theologian and also a philosopher. Welcome to our show, Kenneth Samples. This is Zain Khan. Welcome to Zain Khan Live.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Let's get to our first question. How would you explain the meaning behind a philosophical argument for God?
Well, I think that there are a lot of ways in which philosophers, theologians, people of various religious positions have reasoned toward God. There are deductive arguments. In logic, a deductive argument is characterized by conclusions that follow with certainty. It would be formal logic, modus ponens, modus tollens, arguments of that nature. Then there are also a whole series of arguments that are based upon probabilities. We call those inductive arguments. What I would like to propose in my time with you is what logicians call abductive arguments. That is, arguments that provide the best explanation for reality. This is sometimes in a philosophical context known as inference to the best explanation. But essentially, what this argument sets forth is that God is the best rational explanation for the meaningful realities of life. And we can talk about those specific realities. But that is what I think is a very powerful way of reasoning toward God.
But do you find philosophical arguments as compelling as scientific?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Science is a very powerful enterprise. It is a remarkable way of discovering things, truths about the natural world. I think, however, it's very important to realize that science operates upon certain assumptions, and those assumptions, or presuppositions, if you will, are philosophical in nature. For example, that there's a real world out there, that human beings can detect the nature of reality, that human beings can track with the intelligibility of the universe, that we can trust our mind to give us truth about reality, that our senses are reliable, and further things like the reliability of mathematics, the laws of logic. So I would argue that the best way of reasoning toward God is to reason both in a scientific and in a philosophical manner. And of course, people of different religions within theism, Jews, Christians, Muslims, would argue as well according to revelation. But to answer your question directly, I think both philosophy and science have a lot of important things to say about evidences for God.
Let's get to the last and the most important question. What do you see as the most compelling philosophical argument for a creator?
Yeah, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to offer what philosophers call a cumulative case. That is, I'm going to give you several different pieces of evidence that I think provides a very powerful evidence for God, or an argument for God. So let me begin with this, that the existence of God provides a rationally plausible explanation for the existence of the universe. Where did the universe come from? Why is it here? It doesn't appear to be a necessary reality. It appears to be dependent and contingent. So God provides a metaphysical explanation for the reality of the universe. But then we could also begin to ask other questions. Why did the universe have a beginning? Big Bang cosmology, which is the standard interpretation about the origin of the universe, says that the universe had a beginning. Well, if something begins, to quote the Kalam cosmological arguments, which has roots in Islamic theology, it's also accepted by many Christian philosophers. If the universe had a beginning, then it requires a cause. The universe did have a beginning, and therefore it requires a cosmic cause. I think the best explanation for the beginning of the universe and its existence is that God exists. We could also raise questions about the rational plausibility of things like order and design and elegance in the universe. The universe is ordered by the laws of physics. The universe appears to have been fine-tuned to allow for advanced life. All of these things, I think, are best explained by a mind behind the universe. And we can even ask the question, and I find this to be a very compelling argument, why is it that the universe is understandable by human beings? I mean, if there's no God and we're the product of blind mechanistic natural processes, what would be the odds that human beings who would arise by chance, by random physical forces, would somehow have the mental, rational ability to track the intelligibility of the universe? I think it's better to think that God created the world, that He created human beings, and those human beings that God created have the capacity to track the intelligibility of the universe. But we could also look at the things we can't see. We can't see numbers. We can't see the laws of logic. There are universal principles. Why should math be reliable and trustworthy? How do we explain the non-physical realities, the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, the law of excluded middle? Again, I think those non-physical entities, math, logic, etc., are best explained coming from a cosmic mind. And furthermore, we can talk about human consciousness. I mean, some of the most difficult things for scientists to understand, to provide an explanation for, is human consciousness. How did it come about? How did it arise? Certainly naturalist, atheist philosophers, scientists of mind attempt to maybe produce a reductionary explanation. But all of these have been very, very difficult. How did life begin? How did consciousness begin? How did human beings come into being? It seems to me that the best explanation is that a creator who is infinitely rational, who has eternal capacities, was able to bring these things forward. And there are other things we could talk about. Objective morality. Why is it right to be truthful and honest and courageous? Why is it wrong to murder innocent human beings? How do we explain moral values? Again, the theistic religions of the world, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, have proposed that morality comes from the very character of God. And we could talk about questions like human beings. Why is it that human beings yearn for meaning and purpose and significance? Why do human beings seem that they need a spiritual reality? Why are they driven in this way? a rationally plausible explanation is that God has made human beings and that they yearn for him because he has created them this way. And philosophers also talk about an innate sense of God. That is, it appears that throughout the history of human beings, people have wrestled with this question of God and questions about origin and destiny. Again, it's difficult to get away from God. And so I would say that all of these things that I've been talking about provide what philosophers call a cumulative case, meaning that these meaningful realities, the universe, life itself, human being, abstract realities, morality, that all of these things require an adequate explanation. And most of the great philosophers and thinkers through the centuries have believed that the best explanation for these profound realities is found in a being that exists beyond the universe, a transcendent reality that has brought all of these meaningful realities into existence. So that is, in my mind, a powerful way of presenting a philosophical case for the existence of God.
Thank you so much, Kenneth Samples, for being on Zain Live. Looking forward to have you again on our show soon.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed my time with you.
This was Kenneth Samples, a theologian and also a philosopher. We were discussing compelling philosophical arguments for the existence of God. But before we get to the end of our show, I'd like to ask all our viewers to subscribe to our channel down below for different interviews and discussions on various topics, because this is Zain Khan and we're live.